Welcome to the Mind Money Spectrum podcast, where your hosts, Aaron Agti and Trishul Patel, go beyond traditional finance questions to help you explore how to use your money to achieve the freedom you want in life.
In this episode, Aaron and Trishul discuss the recent trend of educated workers quitting their jobs to prioritize their life. They examine the question, what is the role of employment in your life? Both as it pertains to their personal choices and as it applies to conversations with clients. While it may feel like choosing to be less ambitious is choosing your life over your work, it may help to reframe your thinking as choosing to be more ambitious about your life instead of your career. And now, on to our conversation. Hi, my name is Aaron Agti. I'm a financial advisor in the Bay Area, and I'm here with Trishul Patel, a wealth manager on the East Coast.
Hey, Aaron. Great to be here today. And thanks, everybody, for listening.
Great to be here as well. So the last couple of weeks, we've been kind of exploring Trishul and my path to creating our own independent advisory firms and our decision to go fee only. And we wanted to go a little further on this discussion and kind of talk about how our firms fit our values. And fee only is a big part of that. Independence is a big part of that. But I think today's conversation is going to be a little more on the personal side. So for context, there was a New Yorker article that came out a few weeks ago about how educated workers are leaving the workforce. And it's not necessarily pandemic related specifically, but some of the observations these workers kind of en masse, and making large generalizations, some of the observations are kind of how they prioritize their life over work, or how does work fit into their lives. And one of the things I've specifically said to clients is I really want to push them to design work and career around their lives and their lifestyles, not the other way around, not trying to fit life around work. And a big part of that's actually something that I've been able to do. I know Trishul's been able to do. And we want to kind of talk about that a little more in depth of what point did kind of starting our own business and what are the values of the business we started, and how does that fit in our lives? Just kind of that general question, where does work fit in your life? And so, Trish, I want to kind of start off for you. When was the first time you had considered, maybe not necessarily starting your own firm, but the idea of kind of a traditional 40-hour-a-week, 9-to-5 job not being the lifestyle that you wanted, that wouldn't fit in your lifestyle? When do you first remember thinking about that?
I'd say it was around the time that my wife was expecting and around the time that my daughter was born. And you just kind of start thinking beyond just, of course, beyond just being a bachelor or beyond just being a young couple without kids. But you start thinking, how is your life going to look like with another child in the picture? So I think that's when those conversations started happening on my end between myself and my wife, and it just kind of got the ball rolling from there.
That's interesting. So before then, did you have any inkling that once you had kids you might want to change, or were you kind of content with that traditional 9-to-5 role, and at that time could see continuing that for the foreseeable future?
I guess it's kind of interesting how everything played together the way it did. But for most of my career, I had this notion of, just kind of saving as much as possible. And I had my view on the long goal of reaching, financial independence as soon as possible. And then I didn't really think too much on what would happen after that. But sort of just, a confluence of events led to a situation where, my wife ended up becoming pregnant around the same time that I realized I was reaching a point where I could be, in theory, financially independent. And it just so happened that these two, cross points in my life ended up coming to coming together, just at that right time. And at that point, it opened up the a window of opportunity in my mind of, okay, maybe I can kind of step outside that 40-hour week now. And hey, wouldn't it be great to spend time with my daughter and really take a good amount of time to be with her and my wife during a time where it's often, I don't know if you call it paternity leave, but the standard 2, 3, whatever weeks is common. But I felt like, maybe I had the opportunity to do something a little more different than what might be common. And I, frankly, at that point, I decided to take a sabbatical. And it ended up being far more than a few weeks. It ended up just being a complete career shift or a life shift.
Well, that's interesting. So I mean, it might be hard to kind of think of, again, the paths not taken, but if you had because you had been pursuing the financial independence for a long time and very aggressively, and you'd been successful kind of on that path. So if you knew the numbers and you were financially independent, but you didn't have a child on the way, do you think you would have kept working in that, again, 9 to 5, 40-hour week job kind of for the foreseeable future? Or were you going to get out even if the child wasn't on the way? I know, like, you're trying to imagine like your state of mind several years ago, and it's kind of hard to think of the possibility of your child not being here. But can you think of like which was more of the cause, or which was a bigger factor?
It's hard to say. It could very well be possible that my mindset was in the position of, it's about time I took a sabbatical, or I eased off the gas, because I was pretty much running on, full cylinders for a good amount of time, pretty much my whole career. So I'd say I probably would have done something a little different. And I'd say the timing was right. And, perhaps having a child is, like the icing on the cake.
Okay. The takes up all of your time, but kind of again, like you said, that perfect confluence of timing.
I think so. And, what I quickly realized after my daughter was born is having a small child is probably two full-time jobs rolled into one. It's wow. It really takes a lot of time and a lot of energy and a lot of everything to kind of pull something like that off. I just don't imagine how it's possible with just one parent doing it part-time. I don't even know. She basically became our whole life.
Yeah, yeah. So for me, I don't know my earliest time I'd considered it, but I do remember when I was in high school, my parents' CPA, she was very involved in the high school. She's also an alum. She's involved in the high school alumni association, and so I got to know her pretty well personally. When it wasn't tax season, the office would close at noon on every Friday, and like that's just kind of her company policy. She owned the CPA firm, and I remember being really impressed by that idea. That either it wasn't necessarily being the business owner per se, but that control of schedule. And I mean, well, that's, I'm gonna guess, because I also played for my high school golf team. I was thinking, oh, it's so much easier to play golf once daylight savings time starts. I can get probably 18 holes in from like 3 p.m. to 8 p.m. Something like that. And I remember that being a big factor in kind of some of my enjoyment in high school. So like, I remember kind of keeping that idea of, well, if it's not daylight savings time and I could be done with work at noon, then I could still get 18 holes in. And it kind of stuck with me for a long time. It did, and probably didn't get to actually do anything like that for 20 years. But coming out of college, that kind of control of schedule and flexibility was a factor in my going to work for Ameriprise. And kind of, I didn't know it at the time, but it turns out it's very common among kind of any sales position where if you have results and kind of production, any kind of time you're generating revenue for a company, you can control your own schedule like that and have a lot of that flexibility. So it doesn't have to be business owner per se, but there are other career paths, and I didn't necessarily realize it at the time. The other factor was I knew, going back to being a teenager, I actually liked hanging out with little kids, not babies, but that like age 2 to 5 range. I had a couple cousins that were a lot younger, loved just getting on the floor playing with them. And when I met my wife in college, we were both pretty mature for our ages in terms of those kind of lifestyle values. One, we both knew, like we had conversations very early in our relationship about, yes, we wanted kids. Where might we live after college? We ended up getting married 2 years after we graduated college, so we were 23 at the time, and just that idea of we both knew we wanted kids. I really liked little kids and interacting with them, uh, and also I just love sports. I knew I wanted to coach my kids' sports teams at some point down the road. And I know it's almost a trope, but I really have taken that to heart and really have tried to live that uh, almost as much as possible. And I was doing this before I left my former firm to start my own business, where I would be leaving early on one day a week to have some kind of practice and then games. Then I had 2 kids, and I remember I think that was the first time when my uh my middle daughter was 4, my older was 6. I was able to have them on the same team. I really enjoyed that. And then they were on 2 teams, and I was trying to coach both teams at the same time. And I don't want to say work got in the way of that. That's not exactly true. But it was kind of one of those galvanizing moments of I'm going to start prioritizing my weekly calendar around coaching kids sports teams, and I want to make sure that work is a lower priority than that. And there are times I almost felt guilty to my employers for taking this time and prioritizing my kids. And there's several other factors. There was income potential. There's trying to be not just salary, but also having ownership and building equity. There's other things like that. But I remember I didn't like that guilty feeling. I didn't like that feeling of I had to get out of the office at 4 to rush to pick them up, to rush to get to practice at 5 on time. Like between that, like feeling guilty and feeling rushed, I didn't like that feeling in myself. And starting my own business and being very intentional of prioritizing kind of kids sports schedule. And it wasn't like I don't do that every day, all day, every day. At least not when I started. I would still kind of coordinate with my wife and my father-in-law. We would do different days for pickups, and it kind of required a little more coordination. But that was a big factor for me that I I, I didn't like that guilty feeling, and if it was me only being responsible to myself and my family, and I prioritize that, then it's okay if I'm working slightly fewer hours to make sure I'm actually living the life I want. I've said this is important to me. I'm going to make it a priority, and I don't feel beholden to employers to make sure that I'm following through with my own personal commitments to myself. I think that's probably the best way to put it. I was almost making kind of commitments to myself, and working that 9 to 5 was failing that commitment to myself.
Right. That's an interesting word you use there. Beholden. It's it kind of brings me back to like a feeling of there are times where you feel like, yeah, you might be you might have other life priorities, but then there might not be really much going on at work. Meaning, if you weren't at work during that time, you might not really be sacrificing much performance wise, but you still have this kind of commitment to be there.
Mm-hmm.
And there's other times where you really might have something to do that's work related, but you knew that you could handle it if it was more on your own terms. I'm kind of speaking for myself at this point. But I understand that feeling, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. And there are times when I kind of realized, I'd be much happier not earning, 100% of what I earn, but 80% if I had, the extra 20% of my time to do what I want. And it seems like with a standard job, there isn't really that type of flexibility. Or it's something that doesn't really come initially or right off the bat. It's something that you kind of have to um, work within the confines to kind of carve it out if possible. Like you said, maybe a sales job might offer some type of flexibility like that, but it's not often standard, or it's not kind of the traditional way that you kind of imagine a 9 to 5.
That's a good point. Because I think even at my former firm, I saw all of all the older advisors kind of going down that path. Where one was younger, but most of them, it's like they had built up uh, a big enough book of business, and at that point they had that kind of combination of income to support their lifestyle and time flexibility. But for them, most of the kids were in high school or college. And I remember kind of like, I didn't want to wait that long. Like, because I didn't want to miss out on the kids' sports teams now. And so I was like, that's why I thought trying to be a partner at that firm would be kind of buying into that flexibility component. And there's other reasons why it didn't work out, but I saw their time flexibility. I knew that's what I wanted. And I don't remember the point where I kind of realized kind of what you talked about of the time flexibility is genuinely more important than the salary or the income potential. I don't know when that flipped for me. Because I think that's what like this New Yorker article is talking about, where for those who have kind of saved up enough, they're not financially independent per se the way you were, where they can choose to not go back to work, but they have enough security where they don't need to work at their full potential in terms of kind of income potential, or they can take that sabbatical. And as I was thinking about this for my own clients, when I try to tell them, let's make sure we're designing your life around work, not the other way around, most of them don't look to kind of find a new career path. Most of them kind of that they either enjoy their work or they're fine with the 9 to 5, or I think the biggest example I've noticed is they might be willing to leave their current job without the next one lined up. They want to kind of take some time off and then find their next career, whether it's the same role just with a different manager or a different company. Like, that's kind of to be determined, but it does feel like that's at least one of those little steps where they're prioritizing their life and their happiness and well-being over their work. And I'll spend a few minutes. I'm trying to think if I can identify when I made that switch. But I'm curious. I mean, it sounds like for you is when your wife was pregnant and you had a child on the way. But have you, either for yourself or for clients, noticed that tangibly prioritizing life over income?
Yeah, so I think that the New Yorker article keyed into this from the perspective of the pandemic. And so the article itself, it's called, let's see, what's the title here? Why are so many knowledge workers quitting? So these are, maybe white collar workers or workers who are from, either college educated or professional backgrounds, and they're choosing to choose different forms of employment that aren't specifically related to monetary compensation or aren't tied to that. So that they called it the Great Resignation. And the phenomenon there is, for example, the Department of Labor, they said in April alone, about 4 million Americans just quit their jobs. And it's this kind of phenomenon that these individuals, they can work, there's jobs there, but they're quitting. And they're doing it for, maybe it's pandemic related, but it's also related to the notion that they're rethinking the role of employment in their lives. And as you said before, many of them are embracing sort of a career downsizing in effect. And many others may not even have that next step lined up before they kind of hand in the letter. So, part of the focus for my business itself is, I focus on helping individuals who are looking for that type of financial independence sooner rather than later. It's something that I kind of started with, just for myself. And then, as I started getting the business itself going. But I think, because of the pandemic, a lot of people are realizing, hey, I don't need to go to an office every day, or hey, I can produce or consider other avenues of income that aren't tied to one specific employer. I can, contract myself out and be my own boss. And there's many other ways to kind of think about it, but the flexibility has been kind of forced on the employers, and it seems like it's been to the advantage of the employees.
There was one question you said. I think it kind of comes from the article, but I think that might be the key. What is the role of employment in their lives? In fact, I think I like that enough. I might try to start figuring out how to use that with clients. What is the role of employment in your life? Because I think I can actually answer that question for myself, but I want to hear your answer first. If you think it, what do you view as the role of employment in your life?
Right. In the past, you always hear the conversation, are you working to live or living to work? And I think for me now, it's more about what do I want to do to keep busy, because I realize I'm happier if I'm doing something rather than nothing. And it just so happens that what I like doing in terms of keeping busy, it also has compensation tied to it, all the better. So I think it's a different approach.
That's a great point. I think that's close to what I had in mind as well, because again, I know my wife and I are different path than you were. We're actually not pursuing financial independence as soon as possible. We aren't saving as aggressively as you did, and we're not going to be financially independent before age 50. But I think I enjoy the work I do. I love having conversations with clients and hearing about their lives. I genuinely love that. And I've seen enough advisors and kind of read enough research about the advisory industry that, especially for knowledge workers, you can do this kind of work into your 60s and it's not particularly taxing. And so my wife and I, we've been kind of conscious about the idea that all the things that people think about when they think of like retirement, we want to travel more, we want to go do all these other things, like we can start to incorporate those parts earlier. And the age of our kids is going to be a huge factor. It's just they're in school, so uh, and I'm still decade and a half away from my youngest going off to college. You're even farther. So it's kind of like they're in school anyway, so we're not traveling while they're in school. And so like you said, like how do I spend my time? And it's like, okay, I need to be work. So I I I guess I've used it in the past to be a little glib or kind of exaggerating, but it's kind of uh, it is possible for me to work only while my kids are in school. Like that's a oversimplification, but that's kind of the idea. That if they're going to school anyways, and I really enjoy the conversations with clients, and I could be compensated for that, and I could really help their lives, then yeah, I like this. And I think that's a big factor is that it's not just uh the time flexibility, it's not just uh the income, and it's not even kind of the fact that I can do this later on, but it's like that feeling of helping someone. I find value in my life for that. And I think it's similar to conversations about teachers, but just providing some help to someone and they say thank you, that feels really good. So, and I acknowledge kind of I'm lucky to have the career that I do, but that it has the interpersonal relationships, it gives me the time flexibility, and I can do this into my 60s. I think that's probably the big factor is that I don't need to be financially independent. And I can actually see kind of the conversation you had with your wife a few years ago and kind of why you started your business. Even if I did get to be financially independent in my 50s or at age 50, if I was being really aggressive from this point, then I would still kind of think, okay, what do I do with my time? Okay, I might as well interact with other people and build a business. And this kind of has both the income potential and the time flexibility. And that part I can do now. I don't have to wait until my 50s or 60s. Now, it was quite a big challenge, and we had to save up enough to kind of support lifestyle to be able to build this. So there is that part of the leap. But that's kind of why I describe it as a lifestyle practice, is that I can do in my 30s and 40s what others feel they might wait until their 60s to do. I can still take the time to go traveling, and even like with post-COVID with kids, like once they have summer vacations, we'll go travel with them during the summer breaks. But even once they're in college, I can still do all of those things and still interact with my clients. I think that was another kind of big appeal, is that because I genuinely enjoy what I do, I could see doing this into my 60s, maybe even 70ish. I don't have to give up some life component to keep working. And when that's probably like I can see like that's the similarity between my decision along with my wife, because her income supports us quite a bit. And in fact, that might be a different thing. Like maybe she stops working at around 50ish. That's a possibility, or sooner, if my business is a point where it can support the household, where I can't do that right now. But it sounds like it's a similar conversation to where you are. Where even if you're even after you're financially independent, how do you spend your time? And for me, it's that's how I view the role of employment in my life. So even if I was financially independent, I would still enjoy doing this work. Have you seen that question, or of the conversations you have with your clients, what do you think some of their answers would be?
Yeah, it's one of those things where often it's not even considered as a possibility. The status quo is you just keep working until you retire, and then you kind of figure it out later. And yeah, the whole point of these conversations is to say, hey, wait, no, you don't have to wait that long. You can have those conversations right now. And the result of those conversations can drive your decisions now. And I think it is an interesting notion. Often when I convey, well, if the plan is to retire and do nothing, then are you sure, that would be satisfying? And sometimes it goes like this. Well, no, I can always continue doing part-time. Well, the current trajectory you're on, that's not going to be an issue. You're not going to need that income. So how about, we consider going part-time 10 years earlier, because that's certainly an option if that's really something you're considering. And wow, right? It's one of those things that it's not we've said this before, it's not necessarily hitting that financial independence number and everything changes, but just knowing that there are options at different levels and at different stages that you can take advantage of. And if you're really doing something you love and you don't mind doing it forever, and it has some compensation component to it that can support your lifestyle, well, then you're already there, frankly. What else is there?
Yeah, that's a great point that actually probably most people don't realize, in part because they haven't done the math or haven't had someone help them do the math. But that idea of, if you get to, let's say, age 40, you saved up a decent amount. Okay, you had a good but not great savings. If you were planning, okay, I'm going to work until I'm 60, and then I might choose to work part-time. Have a conversation recently. One of my clients might be interested in being a dog trainer. Like, income potential might be 20% of her current income. So it's a big cutback, but something she would enjoy. But the idea is, if you know you want to do that, you don't necessarily need the additional savings from age 40 to age 60. Is that you've done this math? We've had it, compounding interest and similar conversations. You don't. The math is more or less the same. You don't necessarily need to add to your savings. You just need time for your current savings to grow. And so if you take your current savings at age 40 and just let it grow for 2 decades, often that's enough to get you financial independence with the lifestyle that you want. So now you don't necessarily need to earn enough to support your lifestyle and to save for the future. You just need enough to support your lifestyle. And if your income's a little bit lower, your tax rate's a little bit lower. So kind of, I think that's what you're talking about, where you might already be there. If we could assume that you're going to have the income from the part-time work, and all we're doing is kind of letting the rest of your investments grow for 20 years, then yeah, you're not financially independent now, but you're on track well enough that you can prioritize that part-time job that you would find enjoyable and fulfilling. Like that's just, the math works out pretty well from that perspective.
Yeah, so at that point, it's a different game. You're not really trying to optimize to the point where you don't have to do anything. You're trying to optimize to the point where you can do what you want. And it's a different conversation. It's a different optimization strategy.
The other thing I have seen a few times, it's enough to make me think it's a trend, but it's kind of not enough to really consider like a large enough sample, that once people start going down this path of prioritizing their lifestyle over their income. And this is actually why I like using the Kinder's 3 questions. And that was a big factor for me pursuing this for myself. But once they kind of had this mind, maybe sometimes just finding a slightly different role at the same company, finding a different manager, something that's just there's something about their current role that is more stressful than they realize. They maybe they don't have to be quite as ambitious to get that next promotion. I've had I know a few people who were engineers. They were individual contributors. They went into management, realized they don't like the management side, and went back to being individual contributors. They went back to coding because they genuinely enjoy coding. They find the work that they're doing while coding fulfilling. They get to solve puzzles all day. And that kind of conscious decision, many times it's not going from high performing career in tech to dog trainer in a 20% decrease. They might be able to either kind of maintain their current income and work less and free up time to do the things that make them happy, or the decrease might be 10 or 20%. Or if they change jobs, maybe kind of that combination, like they get the same salary but less responsibility, or they've increased efficiencies within their own role, or if they're not trying to go above and beyond to get that promotion, they're actually really good at their current jobs, and it just doesn't take them as much time as it did 5 years ago. They can do their job just as well in 25 to 30 hours a week as it used to take 40 hours a week. But they have to choose that. They have to be conscious of not accidentally working the same 9 to 5. So like you said, the status quo is so powerful that if they don't make these intentional decisions, they'll keep doing the 9 to 5, they'll keep doing exemplary work, and they'll keep getting promoted and keep getting more responsibilities and keep adding to that learning curve, and their income keeps going up. They have to choose to be less ambitious. And that's a hard choice.
Right. It's interesting because, yeah, you have to choose to be less ambitious, is also the same way of saying you have to choose to prioritize your life above your employer.
Yeah, that's it. You're exactly right. Yes, they're just two different ways of saying the same thing. I guess maybe we could rephrase it, like, again, kind of either not so necessarily status quo, but like cultural or societal expectations. Ambitious almost always implies income or career. But if we could rephrase that or establish the expectation that you can be more ambitious with your life don't need to be more ambitious with your career.
Right.
I heard another advisor telling a story. Is again, class wanted to coach kids' sports teams. Client was very successful, kept working, and never quite kind of kept traveling all the time to build businesses. And the advisor kind of asked, like, how many days did you spend with your kids? And just that one question, like the client went back and figured it out. And now he was starting tracking days not working and tracking days spent with kids. And that became his new ambition. He wanted to make sure to increase that each year. And so what was business growth that starts off low and you see revenues increasing exponentially was days off spent with kids growth over time. And I've seen this I've seen it a few times where whatever you track is the thing that you end up pursuing almost subconsciously. And for most people, kind of because their income is tracked for them because they have to pay taxes each year, that's kind of the default tracking mechanism. But if you change what you track to be in line with what you want for your life, that'd be another example of choosing life over career. It's you're still just as innately ambitious, but you're not ambitious for career or employment. You're ambitious for your own lifestyle.
Right. Good stuff.
Man, I wrote down what is the role of employment in your life, and then what was the other one you said? I want to make sure I get this phrasing right. Choosing to be less ambitious is choosing to prioritize life over work.
Yeah, basically shifting ambition from career ambition to life ambition.
Okay, you can fill the podcast time while I write these things down. This is the SNL. Talk amongst yourself.
Right. You know, at a high level, I think what kind of made me realize that this path is certainly more sensible for me is at a high level, I feel like I might even be working just as much now as I have been in the past. And I feel like I'm pushing forward my career initiatives that are um, certainly acceptable clip for me now as it has been in the past as well. And I think it's because I'm pushing forward those life objectives as well. And at the same time, I still may be working a good amount of hours to get this business off the ground. Although I've been able to take my time as well. So it's been one of those things where I started with a sabbatical, as I mentioned, where it just took almost pretty much a year off and did nothing. Nothing really career related. I did start writing a blog because I wanted to, a financial blog. But even when I started this business, it started as being a couple days a week, and the rest of the time I spent with my daughter. And it's expanded from there, but it doesn't feel like the strain it was before, or it feels a lot lighter. And one of the things I realized earlier this year, and it's even true now, is uh, I look forward to Mondays. And that's a pretty big difference, because even over my entire career, I've been a top performer. I've done pretty well, but there's a difference, and that's a really big difference. I don't feel so burnt out at the end of a given week that I need to rest up incredibly for the weekend so that I'm ready to do it again, and then give them my all for 5 days, and then rest up for the weekend and then do it again and again. Yeah, it's at a pace where I'm making pretty good progress, but I look forward to Mondays now. That's something a little different.
That's I I like that. I'm going to ask you to expand on that in a second, because when I think about, I have my calendar blocked off, no meetings Monday mornings. Um, Between like from like 8 a.m. to either noon or 1 p.m. I just no meetings, because I actually need the time to kind of catch up, because I do a pretty good job of not checking work email over the weekend. And so I drop my kids off at school Monday morning. I sit down at my desk because I'll make my coffee, but I'm in no rush at all on Monday mornings, and I'll kind of catch up. And a lot of times, especially during football season, it's just catching up on all the football games that I couldn't watch on Sunday, and what's going to happen, and how my fantasy teams do. But it's like I I've blocked these off, and I look forward to Monday nights because that's when I play softball, and Tuesday nights I play Catan over Zoom with some friends, and my dad. Now we've incorporated my dad as well, so I talk to my dad every week. Uh, Tuesday afternoons I have sports teams practices with my kids, and kind of I have enough of these things throughout the week. Right now, Friday is Ted Lasso day, so as soon as kids go to bed, my wife and I watch Ted Lasso. Uh, Saturday is gonna be out at sports fields, and like I have enough of these kind of rhythms to my week that are all things I genuinely love and enjoy, and I kind of fit the work stuff around that. Like I block off all of these things first, and then when I'm trying to to schedule an appointment with a client, it's like, oh, can't do Monday morning. I can do Monday at 2 p.m. I kind of make sure we record every Wednesday, and so I block off this, and I don't have any meetings Wednesday mornings because I'm talking to Trishul, and like because I enjoy these conversations. Like I genuinely have, I won't say it's fun. Some of the conversations are fun. They're all enjoyable. Some of them feel a little bit like studying for the CFP. It's like reading the New Yorker. It doesn't always feel fun, but I find it valuable and interesting and engaging. That's probably the better way to say it. The conversations with you are always engaging. But it's kind of like I've blocked off enough of the things that I want to do, and I reach out to friends like, hey, can we try and play golf next month or the month after? Like trying to schedule golf instead of just like hoping that it happens, prioritizing, okay, we'll do whatever it takes to figure out our calendars, and we'll have to look far in advance, but I'm going to make sure that I get to go play golf with my friends. That's my personal kind of current example. And I think that's there's enough of these things where, again, if you whether it's tracking it or prioritizing or choosing it, I love the idea, like I'm ambitious about life. I got a lot of things to do. I'm the PTA treasurer now. I'm coaching my middle daughter and my son's soccer teams. I am trying to help out at my older daughter's softball team. I'm commissioner of a few fantasy football leagues. Another friend got me to join a fantasy EPL league this year, so I have to do a lot of research. Like I'm busy and ambitious, but they're all lifestyle things that I enjoy, and I fit in my work with clients, which I also really enjoy, around all that. So, Trish, what's an example for you of something you've done, like kind of truly prioritizing your life over career, like very specific?
Yeah, when I first started getting this business going, as I mentioned, I said, okay, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, it was other things, completely other things. And, for example, that first year, it was kind of slow going, but how often, does a father get to spend, like every Thursday, Friday with their 1-year-old or 2-year-old just doing whatever. I remember that year we were in Pennsylvania, so we were maybe like 10 miles from Hershey Park, so I got the season tickets. And that was our backyard. So I went there over 24 times. And you'd say, it's like Thursday. Okay, let's just go to Hershey Park, hang out there, go on all the rides, hang out. They have the big wave pool or whatnot. This was pre-COVID.
Yeah.
So it was certainly a different world. And yeah, those were my weeks. And it's busy and tough to, go to an amusement park every day with a toddler, but I know, I'm sure both of us loved it.
Yeah.
And it again, it's back to that whole Monday situation. And then I always looked forward to getting back to work on the business.
Yeah.
There's been this kind of initiative or rumblings about an initiative of having a 4-day work week. And some early research kind of suggests that you can probably be just as productive with the full 4-day work week as your standard 5-day. If people know they get 3 days a week, they're going to be a little more jazzed on the 4 days they're actually there.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't feel like there was a major drop in productivity. I was happy to work whenever I could on the business, but I was also happy to do other things whenever I could.
So this is anecdotal. I don't have confirmation. I don't actually know anyone who's participating, but I've heard things like Google does that sort of, where it's 4 days a week you're working on whatever the task is, but 1 day a week you get to do any kind of work that you want. So it's kind of creative work or any kind of project that you want. I've also heard when I was in Tahoe, I was doing some hiking, and All Trails was an app that was actually pretty good. Like, had a good distance, elevation change, helped me kind of plan out hikes that I could do with kids, or hikes that might have been too difficult for them, or even because I have 3 different kids of different ages, which ones the older ones could do, but the younger one probably couldn't. And I'd heard that if you work for All Trails, they only work 4 days a week because, I don't know if it's Fridays or just 1 day a week, they want you to go out hiking. They want you to kind of like be the user test experience for the app to, like, either, I don't know if they're doing like tracking of route based on their location, or just is the route working, like, but they're encouraging their employees to go out hiking 1 day of the work week. Like, your job is to go hiking, which if you work for All Trails makes a lot of sense. And there's probably a strong correlation between people who like to hike and would use the All Trails app choosing to work for All Trails. But I did like that idea of, in both cases, you get down to like a 4-hour, a kind of normal 4-day work week, and then you do something else enjoyable for that 5th. Because like every kind of work culture, if you had some kind of party or get together, or just you bring in lunch for the office and you establish a culture of, yeah, it could be done kind of like by 11 a.m. on Friday and just kind of hang out. Like, people always genuinely enjoy that. That's always a great time. That if you can remove that expectation for that 5th work day being productive, that's already a strong start down this path.
Yeah, for sure. And part of me hopes or thinks or believes even that these kind of lifestyle changes, I feel like, maybe there's some backhanded concern that, if everybody started doing this, that the economy would slow down and the gears would grind to a halt and GDP wouldn't grow as quickly. But frankly, I don't even think that might be the case. I mean, if people were doing more of what they wanted to do with their time and more of what they wanted to do with their work, they'd be more likely to work, long, past retirement age, or outside of normal business constructs. It just feels like a better fit for society. And I'm not sure there would even be a strong monetary backlash for going down a path like this.
Yeah, I like that. I think this is the first time I also want to pose to our listeners a question. Either what do you see as the role of employment in your life? That might be too big, but just what's an example of something where you've chosen lifestyle over work? Even a super small example, you chose to take the day off to go watch a sporting event. Again, I love sports, and that's my kind of default thought process. But like for anyone, you chose to take a day off to go for a hike. You chose to take a hour off, or add like the class. Like if you have a conference, they fly out a day early to go view the city or go something like that. This is the first time I'm really curious because you and I have talked enough, and I think we have a pretty good idea. I'd actually love if any of our listeners could reach out to us and just let us know what is a time that they prioritized life over work.
Yeah, that's great, Aaron. Yeah, great idea. Leave a comment, send us a message. We're listening.
Yeah, you can Google search both our names and find our websites and contact us there. There's lots of ways to get in touch with us. Okay, this was a fun conversation today. I'm excited to get back to my life. I've got fantasy football research that's waiting for me.
All right. Well, good stuff, Aaron. And thanks for the conversation. I enjoyed it a lot. And thank you, everybody, for listening. If you're enjoying these conversations, do subscribe to our podcast. And as Aaron said, we love comments too. So great. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
We appreciate you joining us today for this episode of the Mind Money Spectrum podcast. Be sure to visit mindmoneyspectrum.com to access the entire library of episodes. Remember, it's not black and white, but the wide spectrum of gray area where you get to pursue the freedoms you want in life. Opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance referenced is historical and has no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested in directly. Have a nice day.